What we do now echoes in eternity, said Marcus Aurelius. Such times of change and transition as the past few months have been very stressful, but it has also been a time to get rid of old habits, rebuild our priorities, and learn new practices and new habits. I'm Purnima Ramakrishnan, the host for the GLOW webinar series for women. And today, please join me in welcoming Dr. Elizabeth Denley as she speaks about adaptability to new changes. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Elizabeth. Welcome.
Thank you.
Dr. Elizabeth Denley holds a doctorate of philosophy in biological sciences from the University of Sydney. She's been involved in values and ethics education and training since 1996 for both children and adults, with a particular emphasis on communication and teamwork. She's a mother of two, a musician and writer, and she spends most of her time these days as a student of spirituality, and she's working on publications for Heartfulness. So the COVID-19 situation has affected our assumptions and understanding of how our society operates. Things like, can I go get a haircut? Can I go meet my friends? Can I go shopping? These questions don't seem to have the same response or answers which they would have had 3 months ago. So my question to you is, after we have endured this health crisis as a humanity, how do you feel the new normal is going to be like?
Wow, what a question. So history helps us here. Human beings have been through many such crises. I think something bigger to look at, we've had the 1918 flu, we've had the bubonic plague, we've had many different health crises that have affected humanity, that have caused us to reset and recalibrate the way we do things. Many people would say that such a crisis comes only to force us to recalibrate because we're not looking at ourselves well enough. I think as human beings, we're a little silly, we're a little stupid in some ways, that we need crises to push us to change. But certainly this is a crisis that is forcing humanity to look at itself in many, many ways. It's a little bigger than that, though. Recently we did a interview with Bruce Lipton, Dr. Bruce Lipton, the epigeneticist for Heartfulness magazine. And he reminded us of something that is much greater than this, which is that currently we're in the middle of what's called the 6th mass extinction of species on the planet. It's happened 5 times before. The last time was about 66 million years ago with the extinction of the dinosaurs and many other species at that time. And it's as if the world has to suddenly stop and recalibrate. And if you look at the statistics on how many species have gone extinct in the last 50 years, it's just phenomenal. It's mind-blowing. I don't have them here with me, but it's like 90% of our fish species have gone extinct. So many of our insect species. So we're not just looking at a little coronavirus. That's the tip of the iceberg. The little coronavirus, this minuscule little thing, has transformed our behavior. We've gone into lockdown, we've gone into self-isolation, we've gone into a period, if you like, where people have the opportunity to reflect, to go within, to figure out what has worked, what has not worked from the past. And we've got to pause, if you like. We've got an opportunity to pause with poise, because none of us can rush in this. All of us are in the same situation, in the same boat. And we have many very, very serious social, economic, and cultural issues to reflect upon for our continuous improvement as individuals and as a species. Now, as you said, my training is as a biologist. One of the first things you learn at university in terms of behavior and evolution and genetics and all those things in biology 101, if you like, is that any species that destroys its environment has 2 options. Either it will go extinct, or it will change, it will mutate in some way. Genetically, it's called mutation. Behaviorally, it's called change. Something has to happen. If a species is destroying its environment, change is required. And currently, we know from not only the climate change science, which was all there back in the 80s when I was doing postdoctoral work in California. Climatologists knew about the way our climate was going. Governments knew, but it's as if we've had our head in the sand. We've not done anything. We've been too focused on our own desires, our own wishes, our own greed, if you like, to have things the way we want them. So we were headed on a path in terms of the environment, either of destruction of our species or change. So in a sense, we can thank our little COVID-19 friend. That I'm not saying it's easy for everybody. I'm very well aware of the suffering, the death, the heartache, the hardship that people are going through. But from a higher level at the same time also, it's forced us to stop. It's forced things like planes to stop flying so that air pollution is a lot less, cars to stop driving, cities that were just so heavily polluted like Delhi that are clear. The skies have been clear for the first time in people don't know how many years. People in the Punjab seeing the Himalayas from their cities for the first time in over 30 years. Now the canals of Venice, clear, clean, which again hasn't happened in so long. So for me, this is a time of recalibration. It's a time to say, okay, what have we done well? What have we not done well? And what can we do to change the things we've not done well? My feeling is that people in the future, 100 years from now, should look back at this time now on our generation and say, you know what? They really tried to fix this. They shouldn't look back in 100 years from now and say they were blind, they did nothing. They didn't take advantage of this opportunity given them. So yes, it's true. We can't so easily go out and get haircuts. I'm suffering from that enormously at the moment. But, at the same time, the benefits, I think, of what we can do with this if we come together as a humanity. My teacher, spiritual teacher, Daji, talks a lot about destiny. He's even written a book called Designing Destiny, which is about how we take our life and we don't just become victims of circumstances. We do something with the opportunities we're given, even if they're challenges. They may be horrible situations, and surely COVID is a horrible situation, no question. And many people are suffering, and unfortunately, those in poverty and lower economic situations are going to suffer more than those who are wealthy. That's just the reality. The same with climate change. Nothing's good about it in that way, but how do we use this opportunity? Because in fact, we share each other's destiny. We're not separate. We have to take each other along with us. So my feeling about things like going and getting a haircut, going to the store, what foods are available, yes, they matter, but they're small things in the bigger scheme. And the bigger scheme is, how will we take this forward into a new era that has, if you like, a moral revolution, so that we can bring about some change for the good of everybody and take everyone along with us. Does that make sense?
Yes, Dr. Elizabeth, that makes a lot of sense. And thank you for sharing that kind of perspective. So you mentioned that the skies are clearing up for the first time, pollution levels are reducing, and as human beings, we are experiencing a new kind of experience right now. So which leads me on to the next question about emotional exhaustion. I read that the divorce rates in China has spiked, which is very unfortunate. How to ease out or endure this emotional fatigue which the current situation is presenting? Because what binds us together as a humanity, or what gives us resilience, endurance, strength, during such difficult times is our relationships with our loved ones. And when that seems to sort of collapsing, it's certainly unfortunate. So I would like to hear your thoughts on this.
So there's two things going on. There's one which is the thing of isolation. There are certain people who have been separated from their loved ones. I mean, in my case, it's my kids are in Australia, I'm here in India. You know, I just expected that, like I've been doing for the last few years, that whenever I wanted to, I could fly back and be with them, spend time with them, come back to my work here in India, etc. But of course, all that's changed. So, you know, for me, I'm not lonely because I'm busy and I'm with a lot of people in a community. But imagine those people who are in real isolation, who are very lonely, who don't have their family members with them. That's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is what you're talking about, which is where families are thrown together basically 24/7 because people are working from home. They, you know, you can imagine the poor wives and mothers who are looking after their kids and their kids' schooling, their husbands. They're still doing the housework. Often they go to work as well, but they're having to do full-time housework, no maids, because, well, in many countries in the world, like where I come from in Australia, we don't have maids anyway. But in India here, people have house help. They're not coming because of COVID. So people are thrown together 24/7 in a tight environment which they're not used to. And why are they not used to? Because people are used to going out to work, going out to school, having space from each other, and not dealing, often not seeing each other for much of the day. Many people come home from work these days, 9, 10 o'clock at night, eat dinner, go to bed, or maybe watch television, go to bed, get up, go to work in the morning. How can you have a relationship with that sort of lifestyle? It's no relationship. It's coexisting, but without any real relationship. Certainly no emotional intelligence or emotional maturity can develop in such relationships. And suddenly now everybody's thrown together. Husbands and wives, teenage kids struggling with their parents because they're used to going out partying, doing things behind their parents' back that their parents don't know about, drinking, taking drugs, sex, etc. And now suddenly stuck at home. A lot of things going on that were not known or not looked at before, suddenly in a pressure cooker environment. And really, the fact that there are so many divorces, as you're speaking about, or even stresses and annoyance and irritation in these relationships is just a sign of our lack of resilience, our lack of emotional intelligence. It's a far cry from, you can call it the olden days when there were extended families, when people lived on top of each other all the time. I'm not saying that they were any more mature back then, but they had to deal with the situation. They had to be more resilient. They had to be more tolerant, more accepting, more loving towards each other because there was no choice economically. Today, many people all over the world live in nuclear families, not extended families, because they have the economic means to do so. You know, you have people on different continents, parents in India, children, adult children and grandchildren in the US or Europe or somewhere else. And they're not used to such intense relationships. Now, of course, everybody's thrown in together and it's, you know, it's causing tension. It's a pressure cooker situation. Again, I think the tools, the skills to develop emotional intelligence have been very well documented, for example, by Daniel Goleman. Meditation is the main skill, tool, if you like. The ability to meditate, regulate your mind, develop self-awareness, self-acceptance, self-compassion, communication skills, ability to relate to other people, have empathy, listen, all these skills that come from the heart and from a heart-based meditation practice. So, you know, it's not rocket science. The tools are there. They're easily available. in the practice I do, Heartfulness, they're free of charge, for example. There's nothing complex about doing a practice like that. And of course, it brings you those skills that allow you to handle such situations better. For example, how do you deal with anger when you're really angry with a parent or a spouse or whatever? If you don't have the ability to regulate your mind and your heart, your emotional inner environment, if you like, then what are you going to do? You're going to get angry, you're going to shout, you're going to project things on the other person, blame the other person, all those very immature things. Whereas when you can regulate your mind and heart, when you have a pure consciousness, you may still get angry, because anger is a great tool for our self-development, but it doesn't lead to you creating tension and conflict with the other person. You develop ways to communicate effectively, to pause, to let yourself settle down, to clean out the emotional charge from your system and deal with things in a different way. They're just simple life skills, and they're very available to everybody. So I think that's the key, to learn how to handle the situation better.
Thank you so much. That made a lot of sense. Yes. So I'm getting a question from one of the participants. She's asking, she wants to do something meaningful and she wants to feel good about it. In spite of the physical isolation, we are in the midst of a really noisy virtual world. Yes, indeed. It's so true. So the realm of the mind is always busy and in constant turmoil. And in the middle of that, can I do something useful? But before that, I need to restore balance first to myself, because I think that only then there will be an opportunity to go ahead and serve. So, what are your thoughts on this, Dr. Elizabeth?
It's a very good question, Purnima. So like I said, if you don't have a good instrument to work with, if you're not an effective human being, it's much more difficult to help other people. Can you imagine being a nurse in a busy COVID hospital at the moment? If your consciousness, if your mind, if your heart is not really pure and effective, not a good instrument, you must be suffering the most incredible compassion fatigue, burnout, stress at the moment. And of course, there are a lot of medical professionals who are, because it's very tough to be on the front line. And, I think all of us take our hats off and applaud all the people who are on the front line at the moment in the midst of this crisis. The medical professionals, the staff working in hospitals, the transport people, the ambulance guys, the people delivering food to migrant workers everywhere. So many people doing the most incredible, basic human duty for each other. It's not something that, often we consider all that stuff, NGO work, charity work, as phenomenal. But in the spiritual context, it's considered just to simply be our human duty. It's our moral imperative to help each other. It's not something super wonderful. We all should be doing it. But why are we not all doing it? Or why is it seen as something so wonderful to be handing out food or blankets or caring for other people when they're sick? It's because we've become so selfish in our culture that we see these things as abnormal or superhuman. Really, it's our human duty to care in that way for each other. And there are many ways to do it according to your age, your physical ability, your strength, your skills. Obviously, a doctor can do much more than I could in helping a person who's got serious COVID symptoms. But what can I do as a human being? Well, I can help pack food packages. I can, deliver things to elderly people around me, go to the shops for them, do so many things just to help my fellow human beings. And of course, I can also pray, which is something that I know is often very denigrated in our secular world because it's not understood very well. Prayer is often seen as begging or wanting something, demanding something from God. It's not, in effect. That's a very, very sort of warped view of prayer. There's no demand in prayer. Yes, there can be a request. Yes, there can be a plea, a heartfelt plea. And imagine if all of us, every day, were offering a heartfelt plea for all humanity in this current crisis, for their well-being, for our recalibration of society, for those who are suffering, for their suffering to be eased. Imagine if every single human being on the planet did this every day. It would make such an incredible difference. Because one of the things that I think you learn through a spiritual practice, or any humanistic practice for that matter, doesn't have to be looked at as spiritual, but anything that is about us being human and our human development, is that the world will change, humanity will change when we all give more than we receive. Very simple. If you wake up in the morning, or we all wake up in the morning, what is our intention at that moment? What is our intention for the day? Are we expecting to receive things? Are we expecting things from our loved ones, from those around us? Are we demanding from others? Or is our attitude, what can I give today? Even better, we get to a state where we don't even have to think about it. Our absolute nature of being is love, which means giving. Everything that radiates from us is going to be that state of loving our fellow beings. Whether they're human, whether they're plants, whether they're animals, doesn't matter. Just this giving, loving attitude to the world. I think if all of us, even if it starts mechanically, could start with that one thing. What do I have to give to the world today? And everybody has something to give. You know, it could be a small child giving the gift of a little flower. Can hold such love. You know, you see an elderly person trying to cross the street and you just go and you walk with them, you help them. It will make their day. You say something kind to another person to make them feel good about themselves. How will it change their day? Instead of grumbling at somebody, you know, you see it in traffic a lot. Somebody's not a very good driver and the drivers around are honking and shouting and yelling. What if they smiled at that person instead? I mean, it's in the little things that we can change everything.
Thank you so much, Dr. Elizabeth. My next question to you is slightly different. You know, this word crisis, it has a root word in Greek which means a turning point in during a disease when perhaps recovery is imminent. So, as the wise elders say, every crisis is an opportunity. So, this current crisis, you know, how will we use this time as an opportunity to elevate ourselves as a species?
Yeah, I think you're right, Purnima. I mean, when I spoke at the beginning about recalibrating, so what is it, if you were to ask the question, what is it that all of humanity needs right now? You know, it's a very, very big question. And again, like I said, how will people view this time 100 years from now? How will they look back and say, we did the best we could? The people who were around during the COVID crisis really tried to use this as an opportunity to bring about change. I've been asking myself that question a lot lately. And I listened to a podcast the other day, one of Krista Tippett's podcasts, with Jacqueline Novogratz, and she said something very, very profound. She said, we need to be, in a sense, writing a love letter for the next generation. You know, what is our legacy from this time that we will be leaving them? What is our love letter to them? And this for me is is an incredibly profound awareness that comes with this thought that you mentioned before, going back to what was normal beforehand. To me, what was before COVID was very abnormal. It was not in tune with nature. We were heading on a kamikaze suicide path to mass destruction. I think many, many people realize that. It's not just the alternative lefties and activists and demonstrators who are saying that these days. I think everybody's very much aware that, this was the case. Studying biology and particularly ecology back from the 70s, like I did, it was already well known in the 70s. It was already known in the 50s when Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring. Humanity's known about this path of destruction, environmental destruction, for a long, long time. And we seem to, with all our knowledge, be heading closer and closer to the abyss. Similarly with our relationships, as you mentioned before. We've known about the problems of modern culture, of digital technology, of the need for digital detox for quite a long time. It's like the same happened with smoking. People knew about the health problems with smoking way back in the 50s. Studies were already done, medical studies. But did it stop the cigarette companies from promoting and advertising and encouraging people to smoke, including young people, young women? Such disastrous health effects. We've known the problems of pollution for so long. It's not a lack of knowledge. The knowledge has already been there. It's creating the consciousness to be able to do something about the knowledge we have. It's not enough to know. It's always about implementing. So the question for me is, how do we evolve our consciousness? How do we raise our consciousness to a level where we can make these changes? It's like an individual. We all know what's right and wrong morally. And yet, do we always do the right? Do we always tell the truth? Are we always pure and simple? Do we uphold the values we know to be what's good for humanity? No, otherwise we wouldn't be in this crisis. We all know, but how do we do? And the big problem we face with that is that our behaviors, our tendencies, our patterns mostly come from our subconscious. And they're all formed at a time in our life, in our formative years, when we're very small. It's difficult to change these patterns. I'll give you an example. If you've grown up as a small child in your family or in your community or at your school, learning that it's safer to tell lies so that you don't get into trouble because you're going to be beaten or you're going to be ostracized or whatever. You will learn from a very early fundamental age that it's safer, it's wiser to tell lies. And it becomes an ingrained pattern. So you hide things. You hide them from your parents. You hide them from your teachers. It could be that you haven't done your homework or you've done something wrong or whatever. When these patterns become ingrained in our subconscious, how then, as an adult, do we get rid of this tendency and learn to tell the truth? Even to ourselves. How do we become honest with ourselves about who we are? How do we have the self-acceptance, the self-compassion to do this when we've never been taught self-acceptance, self-compassion as a young child? How do we learn to listen to our hearts, listen to our feelings if we've never been asked the question as a young child, how do I feel? So the difficulty is not that we don't want to change. All of us want to change. The difficulty is in, how do I do it? given that these subconscious patterns are so ingrained and so deep? Well, of course, it takes work, but the tools are there. I mean, in fact, this is what yoga is all about, getting rid of these layers upon layers upon layers of complexity that cause us individual suffering, and that then through this individual suffering and complexity, we end up doing things in the outside world that become destructive, individually, socially, globally. So it all starts in here with me. It all starts by, for a start, cleaning out the root of all these tendencies that are sitting there in the subconscious mind. And these roots in yoga are called samskaras, or impressions. Until they've gone, there is no possibility of change. It's like cutting down a tree but leaving the roots, and shoots come up again. You can go through all the psychoanalysis, all the, self-help that you want to, lifetimes upon lifetimes upon lifetimes. But unless you remove that root samskara, eventually, maybe next month, maybe next year, maybe in 100 years' time, it will sprout again. So a practice of removing samskaras is essential to bring about change. And then also, to go along with that, the behavior itself has to change, because the samskaras sit in the subtle level of our being, in our energetic body, you can say. It's an energetic charge within our system. But then the behavioral changes, the tendencies, the character also has to go side by side with that. That's why I mentioned before a moral revolution. COVID gives us the opportunity to pause and think about what that moral revolution could be. Can we imagine a world that is different from what it was before? Can we recalibrate ourselves personally, the way we are in our communities? Can we find a way to simplify our lives so that we can move forward without going down the same destructive path we were going down before? I think it's possible. I have a lot of hope for this. When I look at nature, this morning I was out and I saw there's an area where I was walking where there's pathways with slate tiles put down. And between the slate, in the hot, hot sun of India at the end of the summer, I mean, the monsoons have just come, but, there are these little plants coming up between the grey slate. No soil almost. And yet they're growing there. Little flowers on them. And you look at that and you think, if a small plant like this can grow up in such a arid, difficult environment, there's hope for us too. We can turn this around, no question. So, I'm somebody who is very hopeful for the future. I'm not denying the suffering and the problems that are going on. They're massive. And for that reason, like you said before, I think it's our duty, it's our need to help each other out more. To stop worrying about the panic demand approach of hoarding toilet paper and hoarding this and hoarding that, which I think happened at the beginning of the COVID crisis. But I think everybody's realized since then, that's not the way. The way is to share and to take each other along and go forward together. And hopefully that will be the outcome of this crisis, as you put it, this opportunity to change direction.
Thank you so much, Dr. Elizabeth. It was so joyful the way you explained these saplings growing in between these slate sheets. That gave me a lot of positivity and optimism for the future. So, what do you think is the way forward in the future? How do you think this adaptability to new changes, which we need to ingrain into ourselves in the future? If you can share something which is easy to understand and easy to execute, that would be wonderful.
Well, how you're saying how to create compassionate consciousness in our culture. I mean, for me personally, the way I know, so I can only share that. Other people may have other ways. But the way I know is to do a heart-based, see, we need the heart at this time. The mind is wonderful, we need it as well, but without the heart guiding it, we're lost. And I think that's where we've gone wrong. We've developed incredible technology, incredible advancements in science, but without the heart involved, you end up with atom bombs being dropped on Hiroshima and things like that. Wonderful technology, no heart. So how to develop the heart in every individual in society? It requires simple heart-based practices. It's only that, it's putting your attention there. Ask yourself, how do I develop my heart today? How do I use my heart? How do I listen to my heart? How do I let my heart guide my life? Now for that, you have to get rid of the overlays, the complexities, the emotional complications that are there. You need both. You need to clear the slate, you need pure consciousness, and you need some sort of practical skill to look at your heart and learn how to listen to it. For me, that's meditation. Very simple. It's not a complicated thing, and it's not a selfish thing, because what are you developing? You're developing your instrument of perception, your instrument of guidance, your instrument of conscience, your heart. To balance yourself, it's the midpoint of your being, even in the yogic chakra system. The Hridaya chakra, the Anahata chakra, is the midpoint. It's where physical body, subtle body, and the soul join, they come together, which is why in all religions, the heart's the seat of the soul. So when you put your attention on your heart, when you develop your heart, what are you developing? You're developing all the heart-based qualities: love, courage, compassion, empathy, kindness, as well as willpower, the things that give you the resilience, the strength to overcome challenges, to make changes. It's not enough just to be compassionate and loving. You also need that very strong capability of bringing about change. And when I mentioned prayer before, it combines both, because prayer includes the ability to go into your heart, completely open your heart, vacuumize your heart, create that connection with God, with the divine within, your heart to heart, love connection with your higher self, you can say. So you're in that state of love, prayerful lovingness. And then imagine in that vastness, that infinite vastness of the heart, you use your willpower to make a suggestion for change, that all humanity is becoming peace-loving, for example, or all humanity is becoming giving, and your will, which is also a heart-based quality, is behind that suggestion. In that vastness, the effect will magnify, it will echo out into the universe. It will ripple out way beyond yourself. So when we meditate, when we pray, when we remove the samskaric baggage, all those complexities of emotional entanglements, etc., we develop this capacity, this instrument, which for myself, for my loved ones, for my family members, for my friends, for my colleagues, for my community, for my country, for the globe, for the universe, it ripples out in all directions. If everybody does that, problem is solved. Because how can you how can you even have conflict on that level when you're in the heart? Because the heart is the we, it's where we connect. You know, the heart is the seat of the soul, it's the vastness of our joined, connected oneness. So in the heart, Purnima, you and I are not separate. It's only when I look from the point of my identity, my mind, my ego especially, which is how I define myself, that I see you as a different human being from me. On that level, on the ego level, yes, we're different individuals. On the heart level, we're the same, we're one. So when we're all one, when we're all connected, which we are anyway, every time you get hurt, it will automatically hurt me, because everything that happens in the universe affects all of us on every level. Even from quantum physics, we know this. We know that an electron in one part of the universe that can affect one on the completely other side of the universe, because once they were connected. So even quantum physics these days tells us what we know through a heart-based practice, that everything in this universe is connected. How to see that, how to live that every day, is just by doing simple practices. And also by letting go of all the fears that hold us from exploring this. You know, I find the younger generation much more open in many ways, because they're not as bound by this. They want a better world. Why is it that it's school children demonstrating against climate change? Why is it 15 and 16-year-olds? Because they want a different world. It's their world, the future. We've messed it up for them. Hopefully in this time, we'll listen to their voices. We'll write our love letter to the next generation and say, we're sorry and we want to help you now build a future. So I don't think it's about huge political plans, or, I mean, they can happen, but let the politicians do their jobs. I mean, for us, what do we do as individuals? We change things at the grassroots level. We change things by changing ourselves. And when that happens, and we let that be the contagious, infectious disease that's going around, the world will surely change, and very quickly.
Thank you so much, Dr. Elizabeth. Your responses have always been beautiful, simple, and candid. So, according to you, you just mean be yourself, be your loving, humane self. So, that's quite simple and difficult too. So, would you like to share a heartfulness practice for the participants, which is easy to do on an everyday basis? Thank you so much.
Okay, so we spoke about the sort of stresses and anger and anxieties and things that are around at the moment, also in families that are in close contact with each other. So I'm going to share with you a special cleaning method that can help if you're feeling particularly emotionally overwhelmed. If you're angry, if you're frustrated, if you're anxious, if you're fearful for loved ones, all these things. It works much better, I can tell you, if you've been introduced to the heartfulness practices. But even if you haven't, you can try it now. And it works better because once you're connected to your higher self through the introduction in heartfulness, it's a more potent practice. But still, we'll try it now. So we'll do this. It's called the Ocean of Peace cleaning. It's very beautiful cleaning. And then, if you like, if you think it's suitable, we can follow that with a short meditation. Is that okay?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
So I'll guide you through this. I want you all to sit comfortably. You can sit on the floor or you can sit on a chair or a sofa. If you can, with your legs crossed, because it's good for turning your attention inwards. If not, just make sure that your feet are turned inwards, gently crossed over each other, and your hands also in your lap, lightly clasped together. Sit comfortably, relax, and close your eyes. Imagine that you are in a gentle ocean of peace. The waves are soothing and blissful. Now have a very clear, firm thought that you are immersed in this ocean of peace. And the waves are removing all your coverings, all your complexities, all your emotional entanglements. Just keep imagining this for a few minutes. Let all those complexities, all the coverings go out your back. Let the waves wash them through you out your back. Feel that these coverings are just falling off you in this ocean of peace. You're able to simply let them all go. When you do this at home for yourself, do it for as long as feels comfortable, up to 30 minutes, no more than 30 minutes. And now gently bring your attention to your heart. Rest in your heart. Relax. Keep your eyes closed. And now make a very, very gentle suggestion that the source of light that is already present in your heart is drawing you deeper inwards. We're going to meditate now. And during that meditation, if other thoughts come, just treat them as if they're clouds passing in the sky and you're witnessing them. Just let them come and go without paying them too much attention. Don't try and concentrate. Don't try and force your mind. Just gently meditate on the source of light that is present in your heart, which is drawing you inwards. So let's meditate together. That's all. So just keep your eyes closed for a minute longer and scan your system from top to toe. Especially see how you feel. See what's going on inside you, in your heart, your feelings, your thoughts. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes.
That was a very beautiful and powerful experience. Thank you so much. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Just one thing, and it came to me in the meditation, and it's about this COVID situation. One of the things that the very first teacher in the Heartfulness tradition used to do all the time, regularly, his prayer always, he prayed for the soul of the world. And my feeling is that if you pray for the soul of the world, you're praying for everyone, everything, all of us. It's a beautiful, beautiful thought for me. So I'd like to end with that.
Thank you, dear Elizabeth. We hope to have you more often on the GLOW Heartfulness webinar series for women.